Fun.
What is the current guidance to ISP for enforcing the assault weapons ban?
That it is the law. That it is the law, except for with regards to the plaintiffs in the respective lawsuits that have been covered.
That's Attorney General Kwame Raoul yesterday responding to a question that I was able to get a fellow reporter in the Chicago area to ask on my behalf because I couldn't get up to Chicago. But he was asked about what the guidance is for enforcing the Protect Illinois Communities Act, which is Illinois' semi-automatic weapons ban and magazine ban and gun registry. Good morning, Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. And we've got a lot to get to, of course, when it comes to the back and forth, because when you've got a stack of cases in state court and then a stack of cases in federal court, it's obvious that this is an important issue, and that's why we've been tracking it ever since the law was enacted. And even before that, if you go back and check out previous episodes and videos, we even tracked the debate that happened all throughout December into early January and when the measure ultimately passed in just a handful of days from it being modified and advanced. So the litigation has led to a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of lack of clarity. And the question is, what is the guidance that the Attorney General's office is giving to Illinois State Police? As we talked about yesterday, I asked for that through just requesting a statement. State Police said that, they are not violating any court orders because there are temporary restraining orders, but they're following guidance from the Attorney General's office. I asked the Attorney General's office via email for, what's the guidance? Didn't respond. I even messaged multiple times after several days, and they didn't respond. So I decided to file a FOIA request for communications about the guidance. And then they sent back a redacted list of emails with very few details. Virtually the entire thing was redacted. And that led to them saying that they redacted these things because of an attorney-client privilege of sorts. So I wanted to see what the in-person response is with the Attorney General yesterday. And again, this is Attorney General Kwame Raoul reacting to a question that was posed to him at an unrelated news conference in Chicago yesterday. And this is the question, ultimately, what is the guidance that the Attorney General's office is providing to Illinois State Police?
Greg Bishop,
Fun.
Yeah. What is the current guidance to ISP for enforcing the assault weapons ban?
That it is the law. That it is the law, except for with regards to the plaintiffs in the respective lawsuits that have been covered.
So the plaintiffs in the respective lawsuits. All right, we've got thousands that are being handled by Attorney Thomas DeVore with 2 cases in Effingham, 1 in White. Then you've got State Representative Dan Calkins in Macon County, a pawn shop owner there, a jewelry store owner there, and in a list of thousands of or hundreds of others in the Macon County Law-Abiding Gun Owners Association. So is that who he's talking about as well? And this is where I think you get to why there needs to be some clarity, because a final judgment was issued in that Macon County case, which deemed it unconstitutional, the gun ban, deemed it unconstitutional, and that is now being appealed to the Illinois Supreme Court. Why directly appeal that to the Illinois Supreme Court if the law it's still enacted? So, that lack of clarity there really, I think, is at the crux of why there's an insistence on having this clarified. I reached out to Todd Vandermyde. He is a gun rights advocate He also hosts Freedom Steel on YouTube. A lot of you probably know his work. But I reached out to him and wanted to get his response because we've seen the Illinois State Police put on a frequently asked question where they say, the gun ban is not struck down statewide. It's only applicable to temporary restraining orders that are in the two Effingham County cases, the White County case, and the Macon County case. Those TROs are only applicable keeping safe those individuals named from being the subject of enforcement of the state's gun ban. But they still have these overarching questions that really I think people are just wanting some certainty over. Again, here's Todd Vandermyde reacting to the lack of any kind of detailed guidance that the Attorney General can provide for the public to see.
Well, I think that the problem is everybody wants certainty. They want to know what's legal, what's illegal. And if you have gun dealers or individuals who decide, there's no prohibition on sales anymore, and somebody wants to liquidate parts of their collection, or gun dealers are trying to sell firearms, and, they could lose if the state police, no, it's not statewide, which is what they have said. Then they can come in and jerk the state license that dealers have to operate under now, which leads to other problems with your federal license. It makes no sense as to why the Attorney General's office cannot come out with clear and concise statements saying, we are treating this as an as-applied only to the plaintiffs in the case, or the judge did find it unconstitutional, therefore we have appealed this up believing that, it applies to everybody across the state. I think they don't want if they were to admit that this was statewide, I think that would be perceived as an initial loss on their end, and they're trying to mitigate that perception.
So again, Todd Vandermyde sharing some of his thoughts about the response from Attorney General Kwame Raoul, but also my FOIA requests being partially denied and mostly redacted, while you've got state police making statements on their frequently asked questions, but it's not super clear and really definitive, which I think is what people are looking for, because this involves what some see as civil rights. The Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And you've got others who make a living off of being a gun store owner. So this obviously is pretty important when taking into consideration all of the various questions. But all of that's around the state level challenges, right? Because you've got the Illinois Supreme Court set to hear the Macon County case, which judge said that the law was unconstitutional. That's now in the Illinois Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has yet to announce that there's a statewide stay on the law. So maybe that's also adding to the confusion here. But that's just the state level stuff. What about the federal courts? I also talked with Vandermyde about the response to the charges that the state of Illinois filed in the Southern District for 4 different cases. We'll talk about that next here with Springfield's Morning News on WMAY.
Talk.
Fun.
What is the current guidance to ISP for enforcing the assault limit?
That it is the law. That it is the law, except for with regards to the plaintiffs in the respective lawsuits.
It makes no sense as to why the Attorney General's office cannot come out with clear and concise statements saying, we are treating this as an as-applied only to the plaintiffs in the case, or the judge did find it unconstitutional, therefore we have appealed this up believing that, it applies to everybody across the state. I think they don't want if they were to admit that this was statewide, I think that would be perceived as an initial loss on their end, and they're trying to mitigate that perception.
Again, just a recap of what we talked about last segment when it comes to the questions in the state level cases where there are temporary restraining orders for thousands of people, but you also have a Macon County judge declaring as a final order in that county judge case that the law is unconstitutional. Plaintiffs there, the attorney for Dan Calkins, says if a law is deemed unconstitutional in one county, it's unconstitutional everywhere, and that's why it's appealed up. He, of course, encourages people to talk to their attorneys about what steps they should take if they want to exercise their rights, but it's a question that still needs clarity. We have yet to get that clarity, especially with a Freedom of Information Act being partially redacted, per my request to try to get the guidance that the Attorney General's office is providing for Illinois State Police. All right, so that's the state case. What about the federal case? You got 4 cases in the Southern District of Illinois that are consolidated, and the state provided answers where they listed off a whole bunch of denials for various things. And if you want, you can go and find my recent work at thecentersquare.com, where you can actually read for yourself the documents of the state responding to all the various plaintiffs. Now, it's pretty dense reading, but you can get through it, I promise. But I talked with Todd Vandermyde about the response, and really, I guess the question was, are there any surprises that he saw in that federal filing?
Yeah, some of the answers the state have made to the claims are comical, in that seems like they're just terrified of admitting anything that the Supreme Court actually said this. And I mean, I don't know if we're reading 2 different decisions or if they're in the twilight zone, but they don't want to admit to the most basic of things. So I find it slightly comical about it, but it's deadline week for us. This Thursday is our deadline to put our reply brief into what the state has filed with our stuff. We were working diligently on that. I spent a good chunk of the weekend working on it and trying to get through all this so we can build a record and get that in front of the court so we can make an informed decision.
Well, and I also asked Todd when I chatted with him yesterday about what the next steps are here with the filing that was made on Thursday last week. The plaintiffs have until Thursday this week to respond. You've got a preliminary motion for injunctive relief that's going to be heard by the district court, the Southern District Court in East St. Louis for the federal cases. That's coming up April 12th. So what's going on here? What's the trajectory?
There's always that decision, but for the judge to have a reasoned order, I think it's going to take a little bit longer than that. It's kind of interesting that as you and I are talking, they're wrapping up the oral arguments in the 5 New York cases that are pending over their revamped carry law and what they're doing out there. And the Supreme Court specifically sent a warning shot across the bow of the Second Circuit Court of Appeals because they were issuing stays against the local judges' preliminary injunctions without any reasoning. They were just saying, yeah, no, we're going to stay this. So I think that to avoid that kind of a prospect, especially when we're looking at, an actual statewide injunction against the entire act, that in these cases that he will want to reason it out. And it'll be interesting between now and April 12th, because you have cases in California and cases in Maryland that are pending already that have been through the arguments and all that, and we're waiting decisions.
So, obviously, still a lot more to come on these cases, not just the state-level case that's in front of the Illinois Supreme Court to be heard mid-May, but also the federal Southern District cases to be heard April 12th. And you could have other decisions made in various cases across the country impacting this question on, can a state ban common-use weapons, at least common-use weapons that plaintiffs allege are common use. So we'll watch all of this, and I appreciate everybody for chiming in and tuning in. There's obviously immense interest in this, not just in the few stories far in between, but with a better understanding of how these things are moving through. What are some of the big questions that aren't being asked? So I think having that constant, as another reporter friend of mine called it, drumbeat reporting, really is helpful and beneficial, and I think a lot of you do realize that. So I appreciate everybody for chiming in, tuning in, sharing details, commenting, liking the videos, sharing the videos, and the sort. So make that happen.